This is Ace. Welcome, Monks and Mavericks. Today we're going to be talking to Matt Berry, also
Fox Hound. He's a full dog brother, and definitely has, of all the dog brothers in the organization, a disproportionate number of fights to his name. Matty, there.
Yes, sir, I am.
So why don't you give the folks a skinny on what maladjusted youth activities led you to what you're doing right now?
Um, well, so
Angst as well, the angst.
right. Oh, there was so much angst, dude. So much angst. I listened to a lot of Linkin Park in my teen years, so there was definitely angst. Well, my name is Matt Berry. I grew up in a small, very white, very safe suburb of Boston, Massachusetts. I have
So not
um,
Saudi?
I did not grow up in Southie. A much safer, much more gentrified at that time area. Now, a lot of the kind of older areas in the city are kind of going that way. But anyway, no, most of my um, adventures have been self-directed from that point. But basically, as I said, I am a member of an organization called the Dog Brothers. We're a full contact stick fighting organization. Most of the guys that fight in Dog Brothers are Kali or Eskrima or Arnis practitioners. There's quite a few Krabi Krabong practitioners. So, Filipino and Thai martial arts, but there's also guys that do all kinds of other things. You've had my brother Thomas on here, Gong Fu Dog. He's a traditional Chinese kung fu guy who if you tell him he can't do it, he's gonna show you how he can. So he's taken traditional Chinese stuff, which a lot of
Am
weapons
I the
guys.
only one that was disappointed that he didn't take the dog brother name Dashhound?
There might be one. There might be one
Maybe,
somewhere.
but like if he doesn't, someone has to. It's got to be
Yeah,
done.
right. There's quite a few. So some guys take a name like he did that is a personal name plus dog, or some guys like me. I used Fox Hound. It's a dog name, and there's another meaning behind it. We have a Frankfurter, we have a Dogzilla. There's some guys that have foreign names that have Hound or something like that in there, where you know what it is if you're us. But anyway, my name comes from the period of time when I dropped out of college, and my dad was like, "Oh, you don't want to go to school anymore?" I was like, "No, Dad, I hate school." He's like, "Oh, guess what you're gonna do? You're gonna get a job and move out of my house now." So I started working on a fox hunt. This is a very English thing to do, is to fox hunt. It's like a very upper crust, upper class kind of thing over there. But in the US, it's a little bit more laid back. I just happened to need a job and a place to live at the right time. That these guys were looking for someone who's willing to pick up dog shit by the 5 gallon bucket and get poison ivy and pick ticks off themselves. Uh, it worked out really well for everybody. And I stayed for a couple of years. I took care of a pack of English foxhounds. I had 26 couple, which is 52 adult English foxhounds. They range from the smaller bitches would be maybe 55 to 60 pounds to some of the biggest males for like around 100. It was an interesting time in my life. I was young. I was like 20, 21, 22, and that helped me form some certain ideas about manhood that I had not up to that point. But from my first moment of picking up a stick with the intention of smacking some other dude with it, I kind of knew that Foxhound was going to be my name. Some people that's the case, some people it's not. But there's other people who allow the group to name them, or whatever. But for most of us, having gone through fighting in several gatherings, will it'll bring that name out to the forefront in them. But anyway, that's kind of it's kind of putting a little bit of the cart before the horse, if people don't know what that is. But I'll get to what a full dog brother is, because I'm assuming that some of the guys that are martial artists, Filipino martial artists, whatever, would understand what I was talking about just from having heard about the Dog Brothers, but especially guys in the combatives world or the EDC community, maybe you have no idea what I'm saying, and it doesn't make any sense. But I grew up playing sports. I played ice hockey, I played lacrosse, and then as an adult, I played rugby, and those things were great. But I'm a mediocre athlete. I'm an athlete, I'm going to be a lifelong athlete, but I'm a mediocre one. And in my mid 20s, I happened to come across the Filipino martial arts and the Dog Brothers. And I saw this video from National Geographic, Nat Geo. And they did this, like, they called it like Fight Club No Limits or some BS name like that. I think it was published in maybe 2007 or 8. I found it in 2009, and I saw these absolute maniacs doing something like MMA but with sticks. And I was like, huh. I wonder what this is all about. And I kind of pressed into it a little bit. And I was like, oh, Filipino martial arts. And I had started an experience working in bars. I worked in bars and restaurants after the dog thing, the hound thing. Everything from washing dishes to managing a really fancy restaurant and everything in between. But the whole time working the door and bouncing. And really early on in my 20s, I had a friend get stabbed at work. Not actually at the door. It was a conflict between two cooks, believe it or not. But one guy stabbed the other guy, and I ended up doing the best that I could to help save his life. I mean, it was, putting pressure on a wound and like just hoping the ambulance showed up kind of thing. But then after that experience, I decided to start to learn about the reality of knives and to get my National Registry MT. So did those couple of things. And especially when you are very first kind of scratching the surface of learning the reality of knives, you're going to come across the Filipino martial arts. I did. It looked cool. The 2000s, YouTube was coming out, so you started to see certain things for the first time. I'd never seen anybody do the things like Benicio del Toro and Tommy Lee Jones and The Hunted, that Psyoc stuff. Like, I had never even seen any of that in movies. Stuff you had seen up to that point with knives was so goofy and unrealistic. But now that I had the blood of a human being all over myself as a result of a knife, I kind of was like, ooh, I understand at least a little bit more about the reality of that situation and how fake everything that we had, I say we, like, your average person understood. And so I started kind of down that road. And when I ran into the Dog Brother thing, I was like, well, I've been playing rugby and hockey and everything else. This seems like this might be up my alley. And so I kind of started messing around with little Filipino martial arts. And one day at like a family barbecue, I have a Irish family, and as occasionally happens, my cousin and I had a little bit too much to drink, and we got some padded sticks, and we kind of had a little battle in the yard, and one of my friends had filmed it. And this was, this was pre-World Star even, so people filming fights, like, he put it on his YouTube page and never thought anything of it, but he put one of the keywords as Dog Brothers, and a guy saw it, and he took vast exception to what we had done, drunkenly fighting and then calling it Dog Brothers, which I didn't do it. My friend did, but and he proceeded to DM me and talk endless loads of shit. And so I was like, all right, man, kind of laying it on thick here. What's your story? And he said, I'm a Dog Brother. I find this disrespectful, whatever. And I said, well, I find you can go F yourself.
Random dude from the
I'll see.
internet.
Yeah, exactly. Random keyboard guy. I was like, oh, you're a Dog Brother, huh? Like, all right, man, I'll kick your ass. And that was an extremely uninformed point of view on my part that I was going to kick this guy's ass, but I didn't know what I was really talking about or getting into at the time. So I hung up a truck tire in my yard and I beat it with like a couple of pieces of broomstick all summer. And I got on an airplane and I flew to California and I fought in a dog brother gathering.
Did you fight
Um,
that guy?
yes, I did. Yes, I did.
How
I
did that
absolutely
go?
did. Not great because he actually knew how to stick fight, and I did not. I was an idiot who just got mad enough to go fight somebody on the internet. Not many people have that distinction, but I showed up out there in North Hollywood and happened to walk into the bar at a hotel, and there were a bunch of guys from Canada and the East Coast that had flown out for the gathering, and I happened to meet them. And when we talked, they were laughing and they were like, "Oh man, who's your teacher?" And I was like, "Oh dude, I hung up a tire in my yard and I've been blasting it all summer." And like, my cousin was a wrestler in high school, so we've been wrestling, doing takedowns, um, and they laughed and they were like, "No, really, who's your teacher?" And I was like, "No, really, like that's what I've been doing. I learned like you cut in an X and a plus, right?" And they were like, "Oh Jesus, you really don't know what you're doing?" I was like, "No." And they were like, "What are you here for?" And I said, "Well, I'm here to fight this guy." And they all started laughing and they were like, "Wait, he made you so mad that you flew 3,000 miles to fight in a martial art that you don't really know anything about?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." Um, So he tagged me up pretty good. They thought that was hilarious. They actually cleared my bar tab, which was quite nice, and they took me under wing, drove me to the fights the next day, helped set me up with some new guys first. I got to feel it out a little bit, but I did fight that individual later on in the day. Quickly, it became apparent to me that he could hit me with a stick, and I couldn't really do much about it. But due to the nature of Dog Brothers, that's okay. I threw my stick to the side and I took him down. And as I got ready to start punching his stupid face in, he drew a knife and he stuck it in the area known as the perineum, which for others they might
Like
call it
your asshole?
the grundle or the taint.
Yeah.
Uh, it's one of those places where, as the Dalai Lama would tell you, you cannot tourniquet. So that stopped the fight. In the Dog Brothers fight, typically they will allow grappling to go on for quite some time until someone either submits or, basically time runs out. But because it's Filipino martial arts, you're encouraged to hide blades on yourself and deploy them when the fight goes to the ground or if you lose your stick or whatever, and see how the person reacts. And if there's a clear kill, generally they'll stop the fight. So that was the end of that fight, and it taught me several valuable lessons, especially one about balls will take you a long way, but you're gonna run into a point where that stops being um, entirely effective, and you're going to run into skill. So balls and commitment is all well and good, but you got to have some skill behind it. So those same guys that I met the night before set me up immediately with a teacher. I went back home and started training Pakiti Tershakali under Green Mountain Dog Pat Gagnon. And then he moved me from just doing Pakiti into doing Krabi Krabong as well. And then he moved away a few years after that. And I started training Dog Brother Martial Arts, which is Mark Denny's own blend of Pakiti, Illustrissimo. He's trained under Guru Dan Inosanto for years and years. So his fighting style has quite a blend mixed in. There's BJJ in there, a bit of Savat even in his kicking, and then he has taken his own sort of recipe of arts and made a fairly cohesive stick fighting system based on the last 35 years of hosting gatherings. There's been yeah, I think this is the first year we did. Okay, so we did sneak one in before the thing that we're not going to talk about started. We did manage to have an open, a tribal gathering in Vancouver last year. It was in February. So everything else last year that would have been a large event that anyone else could have attended, especially, was canceled. But for the last, I think it's 35 years now, they've had Dog Brother gatherings. The current setup is there's open gatherings in the US and in Canada. There are tribal gatherings in the US and in Canada, and then they're also both in Europe. Um, each of those three areas, US, Canada, and Europe, sort of has their own oversight over things, but we're all one organization. We all kind of have uh, one cohesive thread, I guess, between all three, and things you can even tell the difference in the sort of atmosphere and the fights between the three places. But it's as far as martial arts organizations go, especially ones where there is sort of a hierarchy and sort of a competitive edge. It's one of the least ego driven that I've ever found. It was one of the things that I really enjoyed about it, especially compared to like I do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and Muay Thai as well as the weapon stuff, and I find in those worlds, because it's so focused on records and prizes and belts and medals, that the Dog Brothers world has eliminated those things. It really makes the experience unique in the martial arts world. Even in the Filipino martial arts world, to be honest. So one of the main driving forces behind the creation of the Dog Brothers back in the day was that, for the most part, Filipino martial arts competitions, tournaments, whatever, involved putting on this very large padded suit. Um, they have these big padded helmets and these big, I'm not even going to say the overall organization. If you know the overall organization that's in charge of Arnis, Kali, and Eskrima, you know who I'm talking about. But they put on these big jackets and these big padded helmets, and they stand real close to each other, and they hit each other as many times as humanly possible. And anybody that has a medal in one of those things is going to dispute what I just said. But I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, they have a dog in that fight.
Fight you. There you
What's
go.
that?
I said they should just show up and fight you.
Oh, that's always been an open invitation. And I will say, every once in a while, a guy takes you up on it. Several of us went to, so I relocated from the East Coast to the West Coast recently. I was formerly in charge of the Dog Brothers Boston sect, and one of the guys holding down the Northeast. There's several of us up there, myself, Green Mountain Dog, Defender Dog in New York, Canada Guardian Dog up in Maine, as well as some other scattered guys who kind of all came together and created something in the Northeast, where there really wasn't anything at all. When I started in 2010, I couldn't find anybody to train with for real, and not no one even close. I mean, the closest guy was in like Pennsylvania or something, and when I looked at what I had to work with, I was like, well, I'm gonna have to start out on my own. And then a couple other guys happened to pop up in the area: Green Mountain Dog and Jeff, who's a candidate Buffalo Dog. Those guys kind of popped up, and we all started training together. And then Green Mountain moved back to Vermont, which kind of left me in charge of Boston once I became a full Dog Brother. And so we had a pretty well those guys still have a pretty cool thing going between Boston, Vermont, and New York. And then they've developed relationships kind of down the eastern seaboard. There's guys in Virginia, Beowulf's in Virginia now. There's some guys in the Carolinas, and not so much in Florida, I guess, which, you know,
Is
there's already
is there
plenty of
different
dangerous people there.
factions within Dog Brothers?
Yeah, kind of. So the Northeast sort of did our own thing and kind of clanned up. But there's a very Very strong presence in Toronto, the Toro clan. Montreal has kind of a faction based around Phil Gelina, who's in the Black Belt Hall of Fame. He's Sled Dog. He's one of the original Dog Brothers. Um, there's a whole Midwest tribe based around Mall Dog and Smiling Dog. If I'm leaving somebody out there, I apologize. There's a few guys out in Ontario, um, the Blue Water Clan. Those guys are.
So when you're tangling with one of Jelinas's guys or one of the guys from Toronto, do you have is there a certain collection of movements that you are more likely to see? Is there certain things that are favored,
Oh, for sure. Especially
like
depending
a
on
rooster guard, or people like to play a pow po, or
right. Well, so
more low line shots versus high line shots?
a lot of those guys you'd be dealing with if you're talking about Montreal. You're talking about a lot of Pakiti Tersha.
Hmm.
That's where Grand Tuhon Phil is very high up in Bikini, and his guys come from there. If they train under Pirate Dog at all, yeah, that rooster load, that's a big one for him. At this point, I can even break it down by individual fighter style, but you certainly see a lot of that stuff. The guys in a little farther out into Ontario have their own sort of style. If you get to the Toro guys, you're going to see a lot of Krabi Krabong. Um, there's going to involve a lot of power shots and kicking. Um, Once you get out west, there's going to be more of a blend of Krabi Krabong and Pakiti. The Vancouver guys have Loki. The Tricky Dog is their head. So yeah, for sure. As you travel from area to area, you'll definitely find some different influences. Like the Midwest is going to be very influenced by Crafty Dog style, the actual Dog Brother martial arts. There's elements of that when you get to North Hollywood, but then you travel up but North Hollywood will also have a very strong Bikini Tersha element to it.
So if I decide like, hey Matt, I don't like how long your hair is, and we're gonna fight, and I decide that like I don't want to use a stick, and I want to show up with like, I don't know, a trident and a net, can we fight like that, or do
Oh
we have
fuck
to,
yeah.
or do I have to use like a Cali stick?
No, absolutely. So you'll find quite a few different weapon combinations that people sort of gravitate to. A major one that, like I mentioned before, Thomas is a kung fu guy. A major weapon that has started to become adopted by other people was one that he made famous is the three section staff. The three section staff, to somebody who has been doing other weapons martial arts, if you haven't seen someone use it with authority, is silly. You're like, oh, this is this dancing weapon that is part of wushu or whatever, and it looks all well and cool, but how the frig do you expect to make this work in a real fight? I mean, the recycle time, the this, the that, it's awkward. Well, I'll tell you what. Thomas took that as a personal affront, and he made the three section staff with some help from Mark Denny and other sources. And I hope I'm not entirely incorrect on that. I can be corrected, but from what I saw, there was some very specific places that he went to take this weapon and to actually turn it into something that was viable to use in modern day. I'm a big believer in nothing. No martial art came from bullshit, with the exception of those chi ball guys. Like, fuck those guys. George Dillman, I want to fight you. Uh,
Wasn't he like
but
Steven Seagal's bodyguard or something?
I, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. He was definitely living in a fantasy world when he promoted himself to Chief Hadouken guy. But aside from things like that, I don't believe that any martial arts come from bullshit. So there had to have been someone using these things in this effective way before. And whether Thomas has recreated exactly what they were doing or has adapted it using other things, he's become a pioneer in getting this weapon into people's hands and having them use it.
Yeah, I've gotten a chance to know Thomas a little bit, and he's an interesting cat. Like,
Really
you may
is.
like him, you may not like him, but he's got an opinion, and usually his opinion is accurate, which is probably why lots of people don't like him.
I was gonna say that does rub people the wrong way sometimes.
Like, it doesn't mean that he's wrong.
Exactly, which makes
Right?
them even
Like,
madder sometimes.
well, I
But
mean, yeah,
yeah,
exactly. His the 5-star mantis that he learned, 5-star, 7-star mantis that he learned, um, he got a chance to learn from a guy who knew exactly what he was doing.
yeah,
And Thomas said, like, when he, like, the guy who he refers to as his main source and teacher, he said he had already been training for around a decade before he met that guy. He said, and that guy broke his rib with barely doing anything, and he just realized that he knew absolutely nothing.
I think we all come to those realizations as martial artists at different times, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one of the most impressive things is when someone is able to empty their cup when they think it's already full. You know, I know that's a kind of a like a cliche or whatever, but to be able to go from being on a path, and especially as a young man, being on a path where you think that you're becoming more and you're becoming, a badass or whatever, and then to have someone completely humble you. Some guys will go, "Oh, that was a fluke. That was this. That was that," and they'll throw it away. Um, and that's something I've actually seen through full contact stick fighting, especially because the Filipino martial arts world is very cliquey. It's very tribal.
Isn't it though? Wow.
It so is. Uh, but you know, every now and again, I run across a guy who comes out there, guns blazing, thinks he knows everything, and really gets his world turned on his head. And instead of going, "Oh fuck those guys," they're not sophisticated or they're just barbarians or whatever. They go, "Oh, I saw what just happened to me. I don't want to do that again. Like, I need to fix this." A few years ago, a bunch of us on the East Coast all met up in New York, and we were invited to participate in a hard sparring day with a bunch of guys from a Dose Pares school. And their teacher, Sonny Mayo, I'll plug him. Sonny's awesome. Sonny invited myself, Defender Dog, Beowulf, Berserker Dog, um, Guardian Dog, some guys that are some experienced and hard hitting dudes to come to his school and spar with some of his top students. And they took off the big jackets and they did wear. I think we wear fencing masks. Taking a stick directly to a fencing mask, especially in the sides, is not a good time. But it will protect your facial structure. It'll protect your eyes. It'll protect your nose, your teeth, the things that you really don't want to get smashed.
You're still wearing a mouth guard when you're fighting, though, right? Oh dear.
Sometimes.
Oh dear.
Sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes I don't.
Sometimes you don't
Sometimes I
have
do.
one. You just take some bubble gum and pack it on your front teeth so it looks like it.
Yeah, I mean, if nobody will lend me one, yeah, sometimes if I got a good friend there that'll let me use his during my fights. But no, I just kind of it depends. If I expect a fight to be mostly sticks and very little grappling and very little empty hand fighting, maybe I will wear one. Or I'm sorry, maybe I won't wear one. But if I expect there to be grappling and to lose the helmets and there to be striking to the bare face, I usually will put one in just in case. A mouth guard's not really going to save you from taking a stick straight to the face. I mean, there's plenty of hockey players that don't have teeth that wear a mouth guard. But it's easier to breathe without one. I've worn one most of my life, so I kind of forget about it, but it really is easier to breathe without one. But anyway, the group of us went up there and fought these guys, and this one guy that wasn't Sonny's student was there. His name's Nick Merchant. He's a Serrata practitioner and been doing it for a long time. He teaches it. Serrata uses these very short sticks, and I was his first fight, and we talked briefly beforehand, and I was like, "Hey, man, my sticks are like 31 inches long. Are you sure you don't want something longer?" And he was like, "No, my system uses these short sticks, these 24-inch sticks." I was like, "All right, bro, we'll see." And at the end of things, he came up to me and he was like, "What was that?" And I said to him, "Listen, man, you're trying to swim on dry land. Like you're in the middle of the parking lot next to the pool and you just started trying to swim and it didn't work out for you." And what I mean by that is his system, Serrata, is a very close-in system. There's a lot of blocking and checking and locking, and it's done in a way that if you're standing really close to each other, it's valid. There's a reason they do that. I don't know if it was. I'm not sure the history of the system, whether it was developed in back alleys or jungle or whatever, but it was clearly developed in this very close quarter system. Well, we're in an open gym and we're moving around, and I have longer sticks, and I like to smash people right in their hands and their head. And in that case, I didn't let him get close enough to do Serrata, and
You're also like you're pretty lanky as well, aren't you?
I'm only 5'10", so I'm
Okay.
not I'm not particularly tall. My build is fairly lanky, wiry, as they say.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, it just he was trying to do these moves that work better when you're closer, and he didn't, and that was the first time he realized what was going on. I was like, yeah, man, you were swimming really well, and if you'd walked across the parking lot, you could have done it in the water, but you weren't. You were on the on the pavement, and
Well, eight inches difference in reach per stick, like that.
well,
Like
so
if
he
you're
didn't know how
kickboxing,
close.
that's like you having a 16 inches more of reach.
Absolutely, but
Fuck.
Mike Tyson made that work pretty well, didn't he? Because he knew how to close the distance. He
Hmm.
knew how to stay safe when he was doing it, and then he knew how to deliver his damage inside.
That's true.
So since that day, that was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that. I've fought Nick several more times. He's fought in a gathering now. He's fought. We do this other event called Beat the Crap Out of Cancer. It's a big fundraiser in the fall. He's fought in a couple of those. I mean, he really took what he saw that day and went, "Woo, let's do this. Like, let me see what I can do." But he didn't abandon his art, and that was the important part. Serrata's legit, and what he was doing was legit. He was just missing a piece to get there, and so that's he saw that as a man who was confident in his system that day. He didn't get broken on it. He didn't throw it away and decide like, oh no, I lost to lost in a proverbial sense to this other system, and maybe mine is bullshit. He didn't get discouraged like that. He decided to figure out how to make his work. And I know that in his particular case, it makes him a bit of a black sheep because a lot of the Serrata guys don't necessarily want to do that, but it also makes him a real badass to take an experience that some people would have said wasn't awesome and then go, that was awesome. What do we do from here? He started training with the New York group of dog brothers, and he spars with those guys all the time. Defender dog, like I said, he's the head of the New York dog brothers, and he runs a group in the city, and immediately just welcomed this guy right in. Was like, hey, bro, come on down. Like, let's make let's make a special sauce out of what we got and what you got. So it's pretty cool to see that happen for some people, and I've seen it go the other way, where people just get exposed to it and they go, well, you know that's not traditional, or that's not this, or that's not that. And for those of us in the Dog Brothers world, we start to laugh and we go, most of us have some traditional background, and then once we tried to do it in a fight, it didn't work out so good.
Well,
So,
there's some hilarious mental gymnastics that go on in arts where there is no fighting, right?
mm,
Like the art is about fighting,
mm-hmm.
right? Like the first art that I belted in was Bujinkan Ninjutsu. And what
Okay.
I'll tell you is I learned a lot about fighting, but I
Yeah.
didn't learn how to fight.
Right. Okay.
And like I grew up in 35 to 40,000 people where they drink, fuck, fight, and play cards, right? Like my first fight was the second day of kindergarten. So like for me, I knew what fights were. I had been in plenty. I had been in some that I didn't even consider fights, but apparently there were. And then I wound up being exposed to this, and I'm like, okay, there's a whole bunch of people that are just talking trash about one another, but like, and as far as like whether what this person does is valid or what their lineage is, like, well, but why don't you guys just fight, right? Like, and I've noticed that in some of the traditional arts where there isn't sparring, there winds up being this kind of weird senpai type of thing that goes on in the gym, in which like, oh well, this guy's been here for 6 years, so he gets to be a dick to everyone that's been here for less than 6 years.
Right.
Where in like you go to a jujitsu gym or a kickboxing gym, or I would assume for Dog Brothers, like if you can kick my ass, like I know that, and everyone knows that, and there's this honesty about it that I think that is missing.
Yeah, no, that's a fact, man, and that's something that I appreciate about things like jujitsu and Muay Thai is that you're not. I mean, you can go to class and you can do the moves and you can do the drills and you can go home and that's fine, but you have the opportunity right away to see how your thing works. But even in the case of Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu, you get to see how your thing works against your thing, right? You're
That's
not
true. Yeah.
you're all still playing the same game. As a kid, I did karate for a few years, and I loved it. But it was because I loved Ninja Turtles, and then I found hockey and girls, and I was like, oh, probably gonna move on from this. But when when we sparred, it was such a structured thing, and Muay Thai has a little more chaos, than just boxing or standard kickboxing. You can throw and there's knees in the clinch and whatever. And then jujitsu is such a dynamic art that really, if you're jujitsu is one of the arts that I feel like um, everyone should know at least a little, because watching someone that knows a little against someone that knows none, you go, oh, it's like a superpower. You know what I mean? It becomes a thing that they can't cope with if they don't understand it at all.
That's
Um,
totally a thing.
it is, and
King of
literally,
the
it's
blind,
like
right?
I was just gonna say, in the land of the blind, the man with one eye is king. Like it's basically what's going on at that point. Is you've got one eye and you're still just even really early on in jujitsu. I tapped a couple of guys that I was like, these guys are so big and jacked. Like, what's going on? And my coach was like, well, they don't know what they're doing. Like, you've been here for 6 months and they don't know. Like, they don't even understand why you're moving to the position you're moving, why you're hit. You just made a big deal of putting your head over there. He's like, I saw it coming a mile away, but they wouldn't understand why you do it. They wouldn't even think to stop you. So, you know, jujitsu is a great art. Um,
How much
but that's
carryover for grappling do you find that you use in your Dog Brothers fights?
I grapple a lot. I grapple a lot. So one of the things that I find to be a major draw for me to Dog Brothers, aside from I spend the majority of my time training for a Dog Brothers fight doing Filipino martial arts because all fights start with sticks on the feet or sticks or other weapons on the feet. but the possibility of the fight closing, someone losing a stick or whatever, is huge. So for me, it began to make sense as I progressed as a stick fighter to also start to work in grappling. I had been kicking for a long time. I've always been a kicker. I kicked as a kid doing karate. I kept doing it kind of as like a party trick a little later on. And so when I got into my 20s and I started getting deeper into martial arts again, I was still able to head kick. Which, if you're 25 and for the first time you try and throw a head kick, it might not go great, but I just kept doing it. So I already had that aspect. And as soon as I started doing jujitsu, I was like, why am I not finishing every fight like this? Like, you put it on the guy. My personal um, kind of strategy in a stick fight. This isn't like setting me up against anybody that doesn't know this. Is I'll try and pick you apart on the feet for a little while, and then eventually either you're gonna crash or I'm gonna crash, and then we're gonna go on the ground. Whether you take me to just I've been taken down plenty of times, but it's a matter of being okay with that. Being able to take risks. That's one of the biggest, I guess, one of the biggest benefits to jujitsu to me in that kind of a fight is being able to take risks on the feet. Because if you wind up on the ground, you say, ha ha ha, I can do this too. It's like I'm not left-handed either kind of thing. And so on the ground, I base my game around being able to sweep and gain top position, and then either striking or accessing a weapon. I've had quite a few fights and where I've been able to take a dominant position and access a weapon and use it quickly and efficiently to end the fight. And guys that can't grapple are completely at your mercy in that moment because they've put all their effort into trying to stop whatever you're doing. They're thrashing about and flailing about. And, if you're in a real life situation and all you've focused on just not getting swallowed up by the grappling moment, if the other person is someone that's going to access a weapon, you're completely in trouble. You don't have anything you're going to be able to do about it. So,
well, not to mention if you don't have any grappling background and you're forced to grapple, it's way more exhausting.
Oh yeah, because you're expending so much energy in completely useless ways. You're going to do a lot of very silly things. But in addition, that's kept me alive against the stronger grapplers and dog brothers. We have black belts. Thomas, as we keep going back to, is a black belt. Omega Dog is a black belt off the top of my head. There's a couple of other guys that are high belts in jiu-jitsu. And, you don't want to fall prey to one of those guys either, where, they have a great grappling pedigree. So they're going to almost ignore the weapons or ignore the striking and try and just grapple with you. If you have no grappling experience, they're going to be able to impose that on you right away. If you do have grappling experience, you can transition. A good example is what happened to Ronda Rousey when she ran into Holly Holm, right? She screwed up because she believed her own hype that she could strike. So by the time she got to grappling, she was all punch drunk. I mean, she had Edmund Taverdian in there telling her she was a great boxer. So by the time she decided to go to her strength, she had been wading around in someone else's water for so long that there was nowhere for her to go. It was
Well,
just a matter of time.
truthfully, there's a lot of guys that wouldn't outstrike Holly Holm.
Oh, for sure, but
Like,
not professionals.
well, yeah, that's true. I
You know
just
what I
mean
mean? And I'm
like
not even talking.
like guys in an MMA gym locally, like they would get beat up by Holly Holm.
Oh
Well,
yeah, because she's a
pardon me,
professional
they
athlete.
would get outstruck by Holly Holm.
Hmm. Fair. Okay, that's a fair way to put it. I agree with you there. Yes. However, I bet you most of those guys getting outstruck really quickly would have gone, oh crap, I'm in trouble. I need to transition to something else.
Yeah, I'm gonna bum rush it and get a hold of her,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and because this getting kicked in the face thing isn't working for me.
it's not working really well at all.
I can't break her foot with my face. Damn it.
Yeah. Eventually, maybe it'll work, but I don't know yet.
Plan B.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Rhonda, by the time she transitioned to Plan B, it was too late. One of the reasons I picked up,
Almost doing a real nice job of like pushing off, pivoting out, right? And
she
like
was,
loading up that rear kick.
but she was doing it because Rhonda was standing up tall and throwing bombs at her.
Mm-hmm.
She was trying. There's a great video. It's like 3 minutes of Ronda Rousey striking on YouTube, and when you watch it, you go, "Oh, okay." This girl was an elite athlete already, but she started to believe her own hype on the striking thing, and she got tunnel visioned on it. And that's a thing that'll happen to guys in a.
Well, she did.
Weapon.
You can go back and watch that. Anyone that wants to. There's not a good linkage of kinetic chains between her feet and her hands, and I mean literally, like from the ground she's standing on, there is not a strong link to
Right.
her hand. It's like me trying to throw a ball left-handed.
Well, that's something that Kali fixes in a lot of people because when you first pick up a stick, you swing in a really goofy way. People that think they know how to swing, like it's very awkward. But she did look like somebody who had just picked up a stick for the first time and was trying to do it against somebody that knew what they were doing. But in that moment, if she was in one of our fights, she could have gone, "Oh crap, this girl's much better than me. I better go to play to my strength or whatever." And it just took her far too long in that fight. But from the standpoint of a guy coming from just purely stick fighting and striking, to add the grappling to the mix, really it put me in a position to be able to go, okay, I can make that choice that she was consciously not making. Well, I can go, all right, this guy's better than me with the stick, which, there's some guys out there that are so good. Like, you would not want to run into this guy as an old man with his cane, for sure. And that's most of us probably when we get old. Is you wouldn't want to pick on that old man with his cane, but there are some guys that I know that are just really, really, really phenomenal. Lonely Dog is one of the best in the world. I mean, I don't care who you are. You could tell me you've got the best stick fighter you've ever seen, blah, 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 blah. He's 6'4", he's, 225, he's 25 years old. He's been doing it his whole life. And I'd say I still got my money on the little Swiss guy. Because he's phenomenal. I've only had occasion to see him fight in person once, and it was almost scary from the sideline to watch this dude. But anyway, that's
You're just putting on a clinic.
oh, he throws low strikes. So like, there are different target areas: the head, the hands, the body, the legs. And most people throw low strikes around the knee. You're trying to shock that nerve in the leg, because that'll end a fight right there. Most guys, if they get one right there and it really hits that, I forget what, peroneal nerve maybe.
Is it the inside or the outside?
The outside.
The outside, yeah. Comperennial. It's lateral femoral cutaneous.
There you go. See, I didn't know that. I just knew it was the ouchie button on the outside of your leg above the
On
part.
the inside, just above your knee where there's that hollow.
Yeah.
Saphenous or your saphenous nerve.
Okay. Well, we're getting some anatomy and physiology in here today too. That's good.
Yeah.
So
the owie button on the inside of the leg.
the owie button on the inside. Exactly. So most guys throw for that because you don't have to go as close to the ground. Like you can kind of go down, but Lonely Dog practices these kangaroo style drills where he drops in low and then springs out real fast. He throws this low shot directly at your ankle, like or almost the top of your foot. And he fought Candidate Guardian Dogs. He lives up in Maine in a commune, like a hippie commune, and he's traipsed back and forth across the country on foot, and he'll fight barefoot even outside sometimes. And he didn't get hit, but I watched this stick come so close to his bare foot that it like tore up the ground behind the stick like an anime or something. And I was like horrified. And at that point, I'd been, that was a couple years ago, but I mean, I had been fighting for years, and I was like, I have never been so afraid of someone's low shot in my life. Because if you took that off the little bone of your ankle, oh boy, that would hurt.
Yeah, right
But
on your malleolus.
oh yeah, right in the malleolus. Um, uh, so when you have a guy like that, you go, holy shit, I don't want to, yeah, of course you exchange with the stick a few times, but you go, okay, that's it. I've had enough of that. I need to close on this guy and maybe impose some clinch work, some knees, some closer in shots. In Filipino martial arts, the butt of your weapon is the puño. So getting some puño shots in. There's a whole system of stick grappling that exists. So there's other things you could do. You may be trying to throw the guy, but you don't want any more of the long distance. You're gonna have to grapple in some way, shape, or form. You're gonna have to grapple, whether you're gonna try and employ Filipino martial arts techniques or not. You have to understand the basics of manipulating your body and the other person's body in a grapple. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I will say I have seen a hell of a lot more judo and jujitsu carried out well and work in a Dog Brothers situation than I have Filipino takedowns and submissions. And there's some stick submissions that I've seen work pretty well repeatedly, but it's ones that everybody knows in that world anyway. But I it's not. I don't think that I've seen more judo and jujitsu carried out effectively because they're better or more effective. I think that the training methodologies behind them and the way that people work them is better. It makes the actual martial artist more effective in a real situation. You can do all these fancy in close moves where you disarm your opponent or you grab his head and you throw him on the ground or you do this and that. Try doing that to a guy who's fighting back. Go ahead. You show me that works on a guy who's fighting back, and I'll go, holy shit, teach me how you did that. And most people can't. And it's not because those moves are fake. It's because we've lost that connection. You know what I mean?
I think that's pretty accurate, right?
Yeah.
If you're not working against resistance, if you're not trained, like judo works because you're training to make your stuff work against someone that doesn't want you to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
Same with wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never seen a Dumog competition.
Correct.
In ninjutsu, there's a throw called ogyaku, which is pretty similar to putukapala.
Yep.
And I've used that in like real situations, and it worked really well. And it just kind of happened to happen. But I wouldn't. It lined up well, but it wouldn't be the thing that I would hang my hat on if I could hit like a Haraya Goshi or something.
Right. Well, with things like that, I think a lot of the times you'll run into a traditional martial arts technique and it's hard to pull off against someone and you go, well, that's bullshit, whatever, throw it out, but that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. In that case, you have to kind of go, all right, well, how did they make this work in the first place? And one of the main things that Crafty Dog will bring up repeatedly when you train with him is when you have advantage, take advantage. So, if you hit a guy and you start to get him on his heels a little bit and you start to mess him up, well, that might be a time, as long as you keep pressing, his ability to respond is going to be diminished every time you are able to successfully do something. So, maybe you hit a guy with, the 1-2 of stick fighting, and he starts to backpedal, you might be able to pull off something in that moment that you wouldn't have tried otherwise. You have to set things up. And I think that's what's missing from a lot of martial arts is what's the setup? Like what really gets you there? Because if you're, like my friend that I said was trying to swim in the parking lot, you know, without knowing how to set yourself up, all you're doing is waving magic wands around at that point and hoping for the best because someone who's educated at all or is just committed, that's the other thing, like, and some guys are just committed to not allowing you to do things, and maybe they're stronger than you, and maybe it would take you using force to do your move. And for most people that are martial artists, we would say a successful technique shouldn't take that much force. If you're smashing someone with your fists, yeah, you have to throw it hard. Kicks, you have to throw it hard. But realistically, if you watch someone catch someone with a perfect combination, they're not even always throwing it that hard. They're just hitting the right targets at the right time. Their timing, their accuracy, their targeting, their distancing. If you've got all those things down, yeah, power is kind of important, but not it's not paramount. Those other things, especially distance control. That's something that people.
Do you believe that skill will always trump strength and conditioning?
No, not always.
Okay.
There's no avoiding the gender argument because there's aspects there that change things. But assuming the same gender, strength and size in a real fight. We're not talking about if we're doing jujitsu. Oh no, 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 no. You and I both well know the technique is completely trump. Unless you have rules where the person can slam and you taught the person that doesn't, the big guy, hey, don't let your arm get extended or whatever. But I would say almost, and even kind of pushing the gender thing aside, in straight jujitsu, I do say technique trumps basically all. But once it's a real fight, yeah, no, you have to have enough size, speed, and power to make I'm sorry, size, speed, and strength to make what you're doing work. But once you've got enough size, strength, and speed to affect human anatomy, then I think technique becomes the most important. Distance control, timing. Um, it doesn't matter how good an 8-year-old's targeting is, unless it's like to the balls. They're probably not going to be able to knock you out. And even then, they're probably just going to make you mad. You know what I mean? So there is a point where, yeah, I'm bigger, I'm stronger. You're never going to do anything about it. But, you can teach a very skinny, underweight man who's at least strong enough to throw a punch how to knock someone out. Whether he can do it or not without getting knocked out himself is going to depend on where his skill level is. There's a reason why there are weight classes, and that's because once the skill level is consummate, that's when size and strength really starts to show. But yeah, I mean, I definitely have no qualms fighting a much bigger guy that doesn't really know what's up. And I've had a lot of fights. Probably one of the biggest, scariest guys in the Dog Brothers is Dancing Dog, and I've fought him a couple of times, and it is never a good day. It's never. Oh, it's always a great day, actually, is how we'd say it. But if you watch it from the outside, it looks like I'm not having a great time, that's for sure.
What's the scariest or the most unique weapon that you've ever fought against?
One of the scariest weapons that I have fought against. Oh, so aside from that three-section staff, dude, forget that thing. You can get it moving around with so much force. The leverage, especially when the guy really knows what's going on, that that's terrifying. But probably the tomahawk is one that guys are getting pretty good with, and it's not um when you see people do a quote unquote tomahawk demo in Filipino martial arts style, I'm probably gonna make some people mad right now. That's bullshit. As soon as you see people cutting with an axe, like full on slashes through and spinning and all this stuff, that's not how axes work. Get out of here. They stick in things.
Yeah,
Um,
they absolutely
so
do.
the tomahawk pretty early on in my dog brother's career was something that I started to gravitate towards. I like axes, I like that sort of thing, and cold steel makes these really great, high impact polypropylene trainers for their tomahawks. Um, so guys started picking them up, modifying them, whatever, and that I started sparring with them a little bit and then got into dog brothers fights. But oh yeah, I've had my ribs broken by them. I split the top of Trash Dog's head open with one time. They're an intimidating weapon, both because of how they look. They look like an axe and they hit like a hammer. I mean, it's that impact grade polypropylene is really dense, and I've used mine at home as a hammer a couple of times when I haven't had a hammer to hand. Um, it's a very it's a very intimidating weapon. I've seen a lot of really unique stuff. There's uh, there's a young lady who is a dog in the Dog Brothers, Dog Sherlyn, who uses some flexible weapons that are pretty impressive. She does this thing with these steel rings and like a heavy ribbon, like a silk scarf kind of thing. That man, you wouldn't want to take that off the face. Like it would split you wide open, and then she's gonna hit you with the other one. That thing's pretty that thing's pretty messed up. And then the
I'd
other
like
one
to
that I
see that. I'd
really
like
just
to
want
see
nothing
see
to do
some
with.
video of it.
What's that?
I said I'd like to see some video of that. I'm trying to visualize how it's used.
I might be able to find that actually. I'll do what I can. But then the other thing that I really want nothing to do with is the bullwhip. Guys love the friggin' bullwhip. And back in the day when I worked on the hunt, we used a whip because the crack of the whip, the hounds would respond to it when they were running across a field. You could crack the whip or blow the
Hmm.
horn, and they would do different things. But I never thought about really using it as a real weapon because it's only I loved Indiana Jones, man, growing up, but it's really only effective at a certain range. And yeah, well, there's some guys with a 6 foot bullwhip that can just flay the skin off of you while they're moving. Good luck catching them while they're moving. And then when you get a hold of them, most of them are guys that have some jujitsu. They'll strangle you with the thing. Uh, so the bullwhip is one that I'm really, I'm really not all that keen to jump in against somebody that's using. But
I'm uh I'm
yeah,
not bad with a bullwhip.
not bad. Like
Like I can
like on
use one at a
your
full
arm
run when I'm breaking
profile,
a
or not
horse.
bad. Like what's that?
I said I can use one at a full run when I'm round penning a horse.
All right, there you
Uh,
go. Yeah,
and
so
yeah,
that
they're
technique
really neat.
works.
They're a lot of fun.
hmm that's basically the technique that it's very similar to round penning a horse. Is you got to be able to run around, changing directions, giving ground, taking ground side to side, but it's kind of similar. The the best example I've seen of anyone taking on a bullwhip
Hmm.
um, was Crossover Dog, who's a he's the head of I want to say Hanover, the Hanover clan in Germany. Crossover Dog's guys are very heavily karate oriented, and the first time we were in the same place, it was a 2 day event. And the first day, I said to him, "Man, you're kicking and your guys. I said, it's so good. I said, but it's not Muay Thai. I said, what is it? And he just smiled at me and he goes, I will show you. And I went, oh shit, that's not good. Because his name's Heiko, crossover dog, is much larger than me. And he did show me. And we wound up actually in a kicking exchange where he punted my crotch about as hard as I've ever been kicked. It was life changing. But anyway, his answer to the bullwhip was to take um, I don't know if it was a T-shirt or what, a large piece of fabric, and he took a baseball, and instead of putting the baseball as like a striking implement in the fabric, he used it in his palm, uh, and he kind of did like a fan, like a circular fan motion with it, and he managed to foul the bullwhip. Um, it was it was a very cool thing to see. He ended up also getting strangled by the bullwhip because the bullwhip was in the hands of Lonely Dog, who, again, I said I pretty much got my money on that guy versus almost anybody in a fight. Uh, but that that kind of forethought of like, I'm gonna bring a ball and a T-shirt, and that's how I'm gonna take down the bullwhip. Was really impressive to me. So, kind of to circle back to your point, your earlier point actually, yeah, anything can be a weapon that's brought into Dog Brothers. If you're willing to fight against it, it it will be. L. So uh, one of my brothers down here, his name is your friendly neighborhood Cholo Dog. If you're familiar with the culture in Southern California, that means he's a small, tattooed Mexican gentleman. Um, he's a chef, and he's brought a frying pan a couple of times to gatherings, and he's used the pan, which is extremely unique. I've always said he ought to fill it with hot oil first, but nobody wants to fight him if he fills it with hot oil first. I don't know. I think they're a bunch of wimps. I'm not going to do it, but those guys are wimps.
Yeah, a frying pan, that would
Well,
be interesting.
the frying pan is interesting. Typically, he'll go frying pan against a knife, as if someone, as if he was having a fight in the kitchen or whatever. Um, there
Probably
are
because he has.
attributes. What's that?
Probably because he has.
Oh, it would not surprise me. Like I said, my stabbing experience happened between two cooks. It would not shock me in the least if our friendly neighborhood Cholo Dog had to take a frying pan to somebody's dome once or twice. But there's aspects to it, when you pick up a weapon, typically when you pick up a purpose-made weapon, form follows function, right? Like you can tell how it should be used based on um, how it's shaped. Uh, with something that's improvised, instead of form follows function, function needs to work with form. So with something like a frying pan, shit, man, you might be able to block a knife a couple of times pretty effectively, especially if you're in an open space. Maybe not behind the line in a kitchen, maybe behind the line in a kitchen. I don't know. That's when I'd throw the hot oil in his face and then smash him with the edge of the thing. But watching him transition between using the flat of the pan to block and then the edge of the pan to strike, you could see that, okay, this is an improvised weapon that he's thought about using. And he's an expert martial artist. Like, there's that. But, people that have seen the Jason Bourne movies have seen Filipino martial arts in that element. He uses a magazine at one point. He uses a pen at another point. He does, some Filipino hand stuff, his empty hand stuff. So there's definitely some exposure to the improvised weapons of Filipino martial arts out there in media that people can see. But getting to watch it in an actual non-choreographed full contact environment is totally different. But it also gives you a bit of the appreciation that anything can be a weapon if you hold it right. I don't know who said that. I didn't say that. I mean, I
I've
say
seen it
that.
attributed to South Narc, Craig Douglas,
Could be.
but he may have got it from someone else.
Could be. Yeah. I've also heard anything is a dildo if you're brave enough, and I think that, you know, could be attributed to Ed Calderon, possibly. Uh, but we're not sure. But when you have someone who begins to become proficient with weapons, it is true. Any weapon can. I'm sorry, with impact and edged weapons, any item can become a weapon, and that's something that the stick and utilizing the stick itself sort of imparts on you. So when I teach Filipino martial arts, um, generally we use a stick, but I let people know really early on the stick is an analog for whatever you're using. I'm going to show you how to stick fight because the thing we have in our hand is a round rod of, 28 to 31 inches, and it's this weight, and it has these attributes and whatever. So I feel like it's a very neutral thing to learn how to fight with. But certain things that look like a stick fighting move, when you put a sword in someone's hands, you quickly realize, like, oh, you need to tweak your body mechanics, you need to change your alignment of your edge and things like that to make that work. A sword is for cutting. You can strike with a sword from your wrist, from your elbow, from your shoulder, whatever, and you're going to produce different results with that, but you're still going to get good results. If you try and wrist cut with a stick, the person's going to laugh at you. It's not real. Like, it's going to bounce off. But if you throw a full power strike from your core and traveling through your shoulder and all the way down your arm and whatever, you're able to, like you said, the kinetic chain from your feet coming up, you're able to direct the power all the way out through the stick, and that's how you make that particular weapon effective. When you have a sword, obviously, like I said, you don't need as much kinetic power, but you need much more precision with what you're doing. Mongo smash is all well and good with a stick, especially if the other guy is not a stick fighter. I do have the distinction of having had a student of mine use what I taught him to save his life in a confrontation. It did things went a bit farther once he saved his own life, but basically there was an impending physical confrontation. The other guy said, "I'm gonna kill you," and he went back to his truck. My student was like, well, I should probably not let him get whatever he's going to get. And the guy pulled out like an 18-inch piece of 1-inch diameter copper wire. So that's very, very rigid. You're not going to, you can't bend that at all. You might as well be hitting the guy with a pipe. And so the guy drew it back in Dog Brothers would call it caveman. That's pretty descriptive of the chamber that you'd have it in. If it's in your right hand, it's over your right shoulder, about to drive forward at a 45-degree angle. And I'm not gonna blow up my student's spot because he had to go to court, and there was a lot of stuff behind the end of this whole thing, and everything worked out in his favor. But as soon as he saw it go up in the air, he was like, "This guy couldn't have pulled a more perfect thing. Like, I know exactly what to do." He closed the gap really quickly. He shot his left arm out in like a shearing kind of motion to stop the strike. It ended up, because he came in instead of trying to catch it out at range, it missed him completely. He wrapped his arm, took a step back, and pulled it out of the guy's hand. Which, that's a picture
and then
perfect.
did whatever was required to dissuade the attack from continuing.
Sure, we'll put it that way. Well, I'll divulge one more aspect of what happened. So he got it. The guy came at him a little further, and he used a technique that would be called either like a witik or an abanico in Filipino martial arts, which it is a wrist thing. It's just a quick snap or a fanning motion, right? Which if you have a fencing mask on and someone does it to you with a rattan stick, it doesn't mean anything. When it hits you in the forehead with a 1 inch piece of copper, it does a completely different thing. So that's one of those techniques that guys that only focus on full contact stick fighting that wouldn't have bothered to learn because, oh, that doesn't hurt much with a rattan stick. You're talking about two guys that are jacked on adrenaline wearing facial coverings going at each other. Yeah, a Witik, Abanico, fan strike, whatever you want to call it, it's not that powerful. Um, but when you do it to someone's bare head with a piece of metal, it splits wide open. So, earlier on I was kind of referring to the guys that put on the big padded suits and the helmets and everything like that, and they get in real close and they hit each other a lot. And they use a lot of these style of strikes because they're very, very fast. The problem is in that environment and whatever, it's unrealistic. I don't not teach that move to people because I don't think it works in a Dog Brothers situation. It works great in a self-defense situation. Those sorts of strikes, those whipping, snappy, fan type strikes that maybe aren't going to take a guy down who's a competitive stick fighter in a stick fight, in a self-defense situation can completely turn the tide. It did turn the tide. Unfortunately, well, either way, nobody died, and my student is no longer in any. He wasn't in any kind of trouble at the end of court, but you know, entering into a situation even when the other person states out loud their intentions are bad. If you have the ability to get away, I do recommend doing that. So that's my public service announcement for today. The other
Yeah,
part of me
fighting's
says,
bad, okay?
yep, okay. But the other part of me that is not that says, yeah, I'm super proud of how he handled that situation. He handled the situation until it was positive that there was no more aggression coming, and then he proceeded to go with an intelligent and educated sense. He proceeded to go to the police station and tell them what had happened because there was a bit of a mess, and it was very likely they were going to hear about it, and they did eventually hear about it, and well, obviously they heard about it from him, but then they heard about it from the other guy, and things went much better for him for being the educated person. I highly recommend people that train martial arts in general to at least have some idea of the fight after the fight. And the fact that the world that we live in now, where there's cameras everywhere, and people are very litigious, to have some idea of how to conduct yourself immediately after a situation um, is pretty important, and that's something that when I talk to students about self-defense, so I personally teach people from one of three aspects. Number one would be you want to be a full contact stick fighter. I am perfectly capable of telling you about that. I've been doing it for 10 years. And what will work with your previous experience, your body type, your movement style, all these things. I can help you with that. Number two would be somebody that wishes they grew up with a lightsaber and didn't, and they just want a cool martial art where they're slinging some stuff around and having fun and whatever. We can do that too. But when someone wants to talk about using their martial art in self-defense or in a real world situation or whatever, you have to start to dig a little bit into their motivations and their moralities and things. And I don't necessarily mean their moralities in terms of necessarily lining up with what you think makes a good person or not, but more like, Are you teaching a psycho? Are you teaching someone who is a future
I would just like to qualify that everyone is a psycho to their ex-girlfriend.
facts?
Like every single one of my girlfriends is a psycho. My ex-girlfriends.
That's a fact. Yeah. Well, not exactly that kind of psycho, although, oof, I've got a couple of those too. But you know, as as a teacher, vetting your students is really important, but also not developing psychos is important. You can vet someone at the beginning and then show them a bunch of stuff and create a different person. You know what I mean? Some people, when they begin to go down a rabbit hole, are much more keen to jump in than others, and that's something that when you're dealing with weapons is very important to sort of wrap your brain around, because when you teach someone an empty-handed martial art, there is an aspect of, well, they have to be physically capable, they have to be in a certain situation, and if they're going to go out of control with it, maybe someone will stop them before anything goes too far, or whatever. There's a little bit of like buffer zone between, okay, teaching some hardcore stuff and uh-oh, I made a mistake. When weapons become involved, particularly bladed weapons, knives, axes, swords, things like that, the uh-oh zone is very small, and the consequence on the other side of the uh-oh zone is much more severe. So in the case of my student Dave, oh shit, I said his first name. Well, he knows who he is. In the case of his encounter, um, his uh-oh was probably that everything could have. He had the ability to leave probably before he did. Uh, but he was an older man. He was not a teenager or a guy in his early 20s who's totally testosteroned up and adrenalized. He's a veteran. He's a former police officer. He was someone that knew how to handle things. He was not overtaken by the situation. And the weapon that came into play was, it would have taken a little more for him to, like, he stopped using it after he hit the guy with it. The one Abanico, that was it for the weapon. He knew enough to no longer use that. Um, just the altercation continued. But when it comes to blades and you know impact weapons beyond a rattan stick. Like, a rattan stick is a trash weapon in a real fight because it's not meant to break your bones. Like, it hurts, it does break bones sometimes, but it's not a piece of hardwood. You know, when you hit someone with a coffee mug, when you hit someone with a piece of brick, when you slash or stab someone with a knife, you have to understand your first strike can be lethal. And when you teach someone about how to do that, you have to trust that they're not someone who's ever going to go out of their way, or I'm sorry, who's not ever going to lose their own personal attachment to the situation and just immediately go to this martial art. There was a guy, I won't throw the organization under the bus at the moment, but if you're in Filipino martial arts, you know what I'm talking about. There was a guy who was a part of a Kali group that is very blade oriented, that got into an altercation with a bouncer at a bar. Whoever was right or wrong doesn't matter. He followed his Kali training, and he drew a blade, and he stuck the guy, and the bouncer died, and that guy's in prison now. And basically, he got up and screamed from the rooftops where he learned it, and who his teachers were, and they tried to distance themselves, but um, Obviously, his
Is that the
teachers didn't.
incident that I'm thinking it was? He stabbed him in the thigh and then
Yes, correct.
did an additional action to open up the wound channel.
Correct. Correct. Which okay. I train in Libre. I've been training Libre off and on for a little while.
Shout out to Lieber and Scott Babb.
I do love those guys, but I have not pursued teaching it. I don't show people that shit. The only guys that I train, like even 5 packs with and stuff, are guys that I know well, and I'm like, all right, man, I'm gonna show you this so that I can go on with it. But I don't. I feel like there's a very deep responsibility that comes along with teaching people weapons, and for me, um, I feel more comfortable teaching people from a dueling aspect, from a mano aspect of we both know what's going on, at least on a public level, on a level of like I will show anybody over 18 how to do this. Um, I think that you incur karmic points that way by showing people things one way or the other, good karmic points, bad karmic points. Especially, if your intention is pure and someone uses it in a way that you didn't intend, it's still on you. um, you have to grasp that. Like there's a reason I don't teach kids at all. uh, and it's not just that I'm slightly inappropriate to have around your children for long periods of time. It's that kids. So like there's sort of the joke in martial arts, like how many 8-year-olds do you think you could beat up at once? And I'm like, well, are they coming one at a time or in waves? Like, how's this working? But you know, if you have 4 8-year-olds that are committed to beating you up, you can probably take them down. Like, they're 8-year-old children. If you have 4 8-year-olds with knives that are intent on taking you down, that becomes a much bigger situation, because all you really need is about the strength of an 8-year-old to do something terrible with a knife. And so I don't even want to begin to put those ideas into a kid's mind. You know what I mean? Like jujitsu, kickboxing, karate, taekwondo, fencing, even like those things. Those are for kids, man. Like, go for it. But when it comes to martial arts, where kind of anything where concussions come in, like it does. I've seen the little kids at my Muay Thai school. I train under Malapet Sasaprapa. If you know who Malapet is, it's pretty legit. But he's got a kids class, and um, it makes me so nervous to watch the little kids just winging elbows and kicks and stuff at each other's heads, which I realize is completely ridiculous because I grew up playing hockey, where as children we were getting into like minor car crashes. Um, but when you have children, I don't have children, but when you have children in your class, your level of responsibility steps up one more, because those little guys, talk about psychos. Like, little children are complete sociopaths, and they might do something without ever intending to really harm a person, but you know, even a coffee mug to the head, or a ballpoint pen to the ear or something like that. That's a bad news situation, and a kid's strong enough to do it. So I think, yeah, it all kind of just ties into my feeling of responsibility when it comes to showing people weapons, and when you have guys that come into these situations, these reality based or combatives or whatever, it's all well and good to have someone come to a seminar, and show somebody something once, even if it's a fairly exhaustive seminar. But when you have someone drilling something over and over again, that's when they begin to create muscle memory. And I think that's what happened in the case. So I don't know. I don't know the mentality of the guy that stabbed that bouncer. I don't know. what his teachers were like in terms of how they were hyping him up for it, because it takes a certain psychological mindset to use a blade on a person, especially in a situation like that where, like, hey man, that bouncer didn't have a knife or a sword or something, like you decided to go to that as your answer. So did his teachers build that mindset for him, or did he have the mindset and his teachers missed it? And I think a lot of the times with short knife especially, uh, they have they have people work in a way that dehumanizes your opponent and builds these instinctive strikes that, in the world that we live in the northwestern hemisphere anyway, it's gonna get you in a lot of trouble, man. And you might you might take a deserving life and spend the rest of your life in prison, or you might take an undeserving life. And as a guy who's been a bouncer and a doorman for a lot of years, my guess is that bouncer was probably not deserving of losing his life in that moment. And a guy's trained in reaction was to do that. I've had a guy I played rugby with when I was younger lose his life in an altercation with bouncers where he was thrown down a flight of stairs. So I am aware that sometimes that interaction, you don't always know who the good guy is in that interaction, but I don't know. I don't think that training into your average civilian, the instinct to reach for a blade and use it is a good thing. And like I said, that comes from a guy. I am a Libre practitioner. I literally have a knife at my I have a fixed blade knife at appendix right now. I walk around that way most of the time, but I also have a pretty sophisticated personal matrix of when I'm willing to even when I'm willing to even have a confrontation. Like you can't force. One thing I learned really early when I started to train martial arts hard was you can't force a confrontation. I'm sorry, you can't force an ego confrontation on someone who trains hard. Uh, if you've trained to the point where you understand your ability level, and you train with guys who push you, and you're able to spar or roll or whatever, you don't have any desire to get into it with some dickhead on the street. You really don't. Even in that, it made me, even working as a bouncer and a doorman, more likely to be verbally diplomatic with people, and in my real life to just walk away from stuff, because you begin to realize that the things we do in the padded room with our friends, uh, when you do them in the real world, there's a completely different set of consequences, and it's not worth it. It's not worth it to go that extra step with someone that they don't even know what they're doing. There was an article in the Onion years ago that said your average male is 4,000% less effective in a fight than he thinks he is. And
That's
like,
a fact.
that is a complete fact, but it's the Onion. So, people laugh at it like it's satire, but man, satire is based on the real world. Your average guy that would be willing to fight in a bar on a Friday night has no idea what it means. The first time I saw somebody get hit with a bottle, there were three people that were very surprised. Number one was me. Number two was the guy that got hit with the bottle. But number three was the guy that hit him with the bottle, because he didn't know how that was actually going to go. Because you see it happen in movies where either I've seen a couple of hilarious versions of this, but this one wasn't that funny. The guy hit him with the bottle in the back of the head. So the bottle breaks on the guy's crown and then gets dragged through his scalp and face. That's not good. That's a big bloody mess.
That's a lot of blood.
Yeah. Uh, and now you're in big trouble for having done that. That guy got arrested. I don't know what happened to him after that, but
Probably got all the sex he could handle and some of the stuff he couldn't for a year or so.
and it's very possible. The two other holy shit, that was a surprise bottling moments that I've been a privy to was a friend of mine got bottled in the back of his head and it cut his neck wide open. And the kid that hit him was one of the people that helped save his life and bring him to the hospital. And so in that moment, it was decided that maybe the guy that hit him ran away. But yeah, that guy was very surprised. He was like, I thought it was just going to break on his head. I didn't realize what was going to happen. Okay. And then the other one was some dickhead that tried to break the bottle on the bar and then use it like a knife. And it cut his hand wide open because it didn't break clean like he thought it was gonna. It broke all jagged and it gashed. I mean, it must have been like his index finger and the pad of his thumb because he had his thumb like on the bottle and he smashed it on the corner of the bar and it, gashed him wide open. So
What a maroon.
people, exactly. Bugs would have exactly had that to say. And it's because people that don't ever engage in violence, even in a controlled area, have this very distorted idea of how it will work. And, when you get the beer muscles and everything else going and you see a couple of guys go through the monkey dance and they're going to fight, chances are those guys don't even have a clue what's going to happen. It's going to be easy to handle. But every now and again, you got a guy does something unexpected, like the bottle guy or whatever. And that's when, tragedy strikes. Or, you get a guy gets lucky with a punch, knocks a guy out, and he hits his head on the ground. And uh-oh, now you've got someone has a brain bleed and you got somebody else going to prison. And so once training kind of overtook testosterone, and like I said, it might be because I came to it as I was getting a little older. My martial arts journey started essentially at 25 rather than 15 or 5. I think I was old enough at that point when I started getting to the point where some of the things that I knew were kind of dangerous. I was no longer as susceptible to falling into that kind of behavior pattern, but putting that sort of behavior into someone who you don't fully trust, like you don't know if they're going to be that guy from that organization, and then once they do whatever they're going to do, they're going to turn around and say, well, Fox Hound taught me, and that's not a situation I ever want to be in. If my student situation, I don't care, man. I would have gone to court and testified for him. It wouldn't have been a big deal. But that guy that stabbed the bouncer, yeah, no, I really wouldn't have wanted him saying my name. I wouldn't have wanted to be involved in that situation at all. And it's been an interesting time. I've been teaching for about 5 years, off and on, um, whether
Is that
private
in
classes
person
or
or
small group
online or what?
classes. I'm sorry.
In person or online?
No, in person. I'm doing some online stuff now, because of the Rona and such, as well as having relocated so far from home. I lost all my students, and then with the year that we had last year, it was kind of odd. I do have a couple of private students here in person, but when I'm working with somebody, their motivation is very important to me. In the first place, for the most part, I teach people that are like, I just want to learn a cool martial art, and like I like the way that you do it. It's fun, I'm very engaging. I don't spend One thing that Filipino martial arts is really notorious for is a lot of these very rote learned drills, feeder receiver drills, things like that. I don't call them dead patterns, but some people would say dead patterns. I don't call them dead patterns because if you do them while you're moving, they're not. But these very repetitive drills, and I show people those things, but then I go into slightly more active situations, even if you're by yourself, like if you're training solo, or like we're training through Skype or whatever. I can give you more movement and more activity than just stand there and pattern drill. But most people, like I said, that's what I'm showing them. I've had a couple of occasions where I've had people come to me for private lessons where they've had a reason they were doing it, such as I had a mother and daughter. Yes, we said we were going to avoid political things, but I had a mother and daughter that were going to be involved in some political stuff that were very interested in learning some self-defense. That turned out to be more of a what not to do than like actual fighting moves. I did a private for a guy who was about to go to prison a few years ago, which was an interesting experience. I've done a couple of other privates for people that were concerned with maybe having to run up against edged weapons. But if you came to me and you were not either some sort of law enforcement or military and you were like, hey man, I want to learn how to, remove an unarmed person with a knife, I'd say, absolutely not. Go fuck yourself. There are plenty of people that are willing to teach that. If you're not a total lunatic, I'm happy to point you in that direction, but like, I'm not putting that on my karma. If you are military, law enforcement, something like that, it's a completely different conversation we'd have. I still might point you towards someone who's a better teacher of it than I am, but there are things that I have to say, and there are things that I have to teach to somebody like that. But that's about the only slice of society that's getting that from me, probably.
I
But
think the problem with teaching people edged weapons and having that be one of the first things they learn is then the solution to everything becomes an edged weapon.
right,
And my kind of beef with that is you stabbing me does not stop me fast enough, but it stops me permanently potentially.
mm-hmm,
So it might take me a minute and a half, 2 minutes to die. And in that period of time, I could beat you unconscious or kill you,
mm-hmm,
where there's plenty of other options, like impact, as an example, seems to stop people a lot quicker and more
right,
consistently and
mm-hmm.
tends to be less lethal.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
So for me, if I would rather teach someone to dome an assailant with a ball peen hammer because, well, I'm sure you can attest to it. Putting one of those down the pipe changes what it hits,
uh-huh.
but um, where I just don't think that stabbing somebody ends it as fast as you want it to.
Correct. And as you said, it ends it permanently. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
there's absolutely pretty quick ways to take the juice out of somebody with a knife. I guess I won't go.
We're not
Aside
going
from
to get
when
into
you,
the
yeah,
details of it.
when people talk about like, oh, the off buttons and stuff like that, like some of that's bullshit. But like anatomically, oh yeah, you can cause cardiac tamponade and things like that. Things do stop fairly fast, but why are you learning that? Why are you doing that? What is your environment? What situation would you need to know that for? Where like you said, you could solve it with impact or grappling, and the one the one group that I'm a little more likely to lean towards teaching knife stuff to is women, because I truly believe that the two things that a woman can do to make themselves safe when it comes to that sort of situation would be years of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and a couple of days with a knife, if that makes sense. Because with a few years of training, um, a woman can utilize Brazilian jiu-jitsu against most men. And with a few hours of training, a woman can utilize a knife against most men. And actually, realistically, depending on mindset, with no training whatsoever, uh, we got a guy in the Dog Brothers who used to work in an ER, and they used to play this game, Guess the Gender of the Knife Assailant, and they would do it based on where the wounds were, and fairly accurately. And this is a cultural thing too, because in certain areas of the world, you hold a knife different, you use it differently. But this was Southern California. If the attacks came in from like an underhand straight line, kind of to the guts and chest like that, for the most part, as if the knife came from the belt line and up forward in the thrust, it was almost always a man. If it was held in an ice pick grip and the wounds were to the face and neck and upper chest, it was almost always a woman. And there would be more. There would be more, typically more stab wounds. And I don't know 100% what that says, whether that's what he what he's sort of intimated and what I've kind of intimated from other things is that as a man, like we have these certain patterns built into ourselves from time. And it's like we have social violence built into ourselves where we're looking at each other across the bar. Hey, what are you looking at? Nothing much, faggot. And then we get close to each other and we're kind of gesturing each other's face, and somebody pokes
I would
somebody
like
or
to
pushes
go on the
somebody.
record with that Fox Hound does not have anything against homosexual men. He
Oh no,
loves them. He
no,
loves
I'm
them.
sorry. You're right. No, no,
Homosexual
no.
men, please send him your fan mail
Yes, exactly.
and D pics.
I, yeah, I'll take the dick pics. It's fine. No, what I'm saying, like, you get two guys go at each other and they say, it begins with verbal insults, and then it goes to maybe a poke or a shove, and then the punch comes. That's the monkey dance. That's something it's ingrained into men to do this or back down. You'll have a man who's maybe a little. I don't like the alpha beta thing because it's sort of been co-opted recently. But you have a male that feels a little bit more beta and might back down to it. But if you have two guys that aren't willing to back down, it's a very predictable set of um, circumstances that are going to occur for the fight to happen.
That whole monkey dance thing that you had
Exactly,
alluded
monkey
to earlier.
dance. Right.
Shout out to Rory Miller.
And that is absolutely a Rory Miller. Meditations on Violence, great book. But if women get to the point of fighting, and anybody that's ever been a bouncer is going to have broken up a girl fight at some point or another, they don't have that same socialized version of violence. It goes ugly fast, and it turns into just, hair pulling, kicking, stomping. I mean, like, girls go far. When you see a man do things that are outside of the social norm of a fight, it's very like, oh my God, what the hell, man? Like, why would you even do that? But women just jump the gun and they go deep. So by the time they're willing to fight, it's almost like they've lost their mind. Whereas men will still fight in our right mind. Like, we have the programming for it. But when it happens with girls, oh boy, it like we've lost the plot, man. We're so far off the reservation now that we're entering the twilight zone. So when you had these occasions where these victims of stabbing violence would come in, and it looked like someone had really lost it, it was almost always a woman. Um, and I don't know if it's a biological thing, if it's because of how the social programming for women versus men works differently. I don't know. I don't have a gender studies degree. So there's a lot of people that do.
Really?
Maybe they could fill us in. But
From a biological standpoint, the way that men experience adrenaline is different than women.
mhm.
Um, as guys, like you've probably felt it. You'll feel like a pulse or a surge. Like suddenly it's just like it's there, and like it could be the car uh, starts to go to control on black ice or something like that, and you'll feel like
Yep.
a pulse.
Yep.
Um, and so guys feel that adrenaline very, very quickly. Where women, it can accumulate in their system over a period of 40 minutes or more. So it's just this like gradually like it building up and building up and building up. So you wind up seeing a lot of situations where there's been a domestic and the guy thought it was over, and like 35 minutes later, she's
Yep.
coming after him with a frying pan or a knife.
Well, there you go. You have the biological reason behind it. But that also, like, it actually, it kind of ties into what I was saying before, um, about being more willing to teach certain things to women. Not so much in that, if they get to that moment, they're going to want to use the things that I'm showing them. I would prefer they not have had me teach them if they get to the moment of like, oh my God, I finally snapped. But as a man, the instinct to fight kicks in a little faster, it seems, from what you're saying. And for a woman, it's a little bit, so they might be a little farther behind the eight ball by the time it kicks in. And even if you've taught a woman some jujitsu, um, she might already be behind the line in the OODA loop. And so having the ability to transition from, okay, I'm able to gain a little more control back in the situation with the jujitsu, but it's not getting me out, to be able to transition to the knife to work their way out, when they haven't lost their mind yet, is something that I think would, is beneficial. And for a guy who's in the grips of some sort of an adrenaline situation, to have their first instinct to be to go to a knife, no. But for a woman who's in a bad situation, to have her first instinct to be jujitsu, and when that's being defeated, to go to the knife, well, I think that's worth showing. I think that's worth getting out there. So that's my one sort of caveat to, like, I'm pretty picky about knife stuff. But yeah, the gender argument obviously becomes kind of weird in today's day and age. But I don't think anyone who's marching into a situation of self-defense is really worrying about anybody's pronouns or anything like that. They're trying to get home alive. And the way that I consider a successful self-defense situation is, there's obviously no confrontation, but if there is a physical confrontation at all, that the person who's the good guy in the confrontation gets to go home to their family that day, and then gets to stay there. They don't wind up in a situation where, what they did to remain safe was gonna put them, in jail or in any kind of, civil problem, which, unfortunately in the United States, and I assume it's probably similar in Canada, you're going to have a civil issue after the criminal issue is over anyway. But
There's less of a problem here with civil issues, but
interesting.
in uh, in Canada, you have the right to defend yourself, kind of. So pleading self-defense in court is an admission of guilt.
Right. It is here too.
So the other side of it is you're probably going to have to go to court anyway.
Right.
And it winds up kind of being a whole problem. So like I may be found innocent, but it may cost me 50 grand to not go to jail.
Right.
Again, like the reality of it is I just would rather not have fought.
Right.
And yeah, so there's I think it's Blauer that talks with the 3 fights. There's you against you, your willingness to engage in that confrontation. There's your fight against the adversary, and whether you overcome that, and then it's the fight against the system.
Correct.
I also think that from a self-defense standpoint, that a lot of people, a lot of guys like to believe that they can bat bullets out of the air with their dick and their hard as woodpecker lips. But after you've made people go limp and after you've spilled a few people, you start to realize that every time you willingly do this, you lose a piece of your soul. You become a little less human and a little more fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one of the things that we tend not to talk about enough. And like for myself, I get a real kick out of it because I'll be around guys that I work with, and they'll be talking about, you know, that like this situation of how tough they were, this fight they were in, and I know that they really haven't been around very much because I've heard the same story from them like 5 times in 2 years, and that took place 20 some years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So it's like this person's level of experience, the violence, and what they believe that they're capable of and that they will rise to and be able to do. Maybe they were competent then, but if the last time that you put your hands on another human being to impose your will was more than a decade ago, you might want to refresh that man card at the local gym.
That's a fact, man.
Well, you're just going to get your shit pushed in and look silly.
Mm-hmm. That's a fact.
And dental work's expensive.
Right. There's a lot of those guys out there, and some of them. I have a lot of respect for Rory Miller, for multiple reasons, and especially as a teacher and things like that. I've never worked with him in person, but seen a lot of his videos, and people that I really highly respect him. He's involved with one of my, I don't know what I'd call Maya. She's sort of my teacher because I had a lesson with her once, and I've read her books, and I follow I'm a patron of her Patreon and stuff, but more of a fanboy of Maya Soderholm. I don't know if you're familiar with Maya. She's a great swordswoman and does some other things, but she and Rory are highly involved, and speaks very highly of his teaching methods. I know he's influenced her a lot. If you're not familiar with Maya Soderholm and you have any desire to learn about Filipino martial arts or sword fighting or anything like that, she's a student.
She's also one hell of a nice lady. Haven't had a chance to hang out with her a little bit in San Francisco. She actually gave me a ride back to where I was staying when I was down there at TAD the one time.
Hell yeah, yeah. She's very, 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 very cool. But I very highly recommend her books. The new one is The Hustler. The one she wrote before was The Liar, the Cheat, and the Thief. And especially if you're a weapons-based martial artist with a little bit of experience, those books are like mind-blowing. Her late teacher, Sonny Umpad, was a pretty legendary guy. His movements and stuff are just awesome to watch. But anyway, she's someone who speaks very highly of Rory Miller within my own circles and whatever. So he's a guy who I think is fairly beyond reproach. But some of the guys that write some of those books in those circles are guys who are inflating things that happened a long time ago, or straight up making them up or whatever, or repeating other people's stories. And maybe you could go back, and I'm not calling anybody specific out, but you probably could read between the lines on this one and go back and see their videos of their self-defense and look at what we know now and say, I don't even want, would picking up that trash can lid work blocking a knife in a real knife attack? I don't know. But there's guys who have made whole careers off of writing books and making movies and stuff, and some of those instructional movies stopped once it became easy to find like surveillance videos, or people had cell phone cameras actually recording conflicts happen, and you go, oh, you made shit up for a long time before people could prove it, didn't ya? So some of those guys that have made those kinds of careers as older men are transitioning, and writing these guides to brawling and bouncing and whatever, they're transitioning to slightly more soft skills, which I think are insanely important. But I think it's interesting to see people who started to make a career as a hard man coming out with these soft skills, and I don't think that they're as valuable as somebody like Rory Miller, who, you know, his teaching of, if people don't know what I mean by soft skills, I mean the aspects of conflict outside of just the striking and the grappling and the choking and the stabbing and those things. The actual communication that goes on both verbally and non-verbally. Things like pre-attack indicators. Understanding things like preparing the witnesses and
I
all
actually
those
have a
aspects.
podcast with Randy King, who is taught who is taught as a part of VIDI alongside Rory Miller.
Mm-hmm.
He focuses a lot on soft skills.
Mm-hmm. They're very important. They're very important.
They
There's a
they
lot
they
more.
definitely are. They're not as sexy, but
No, exactly. You can't, you can't. It's not exactly the same thing as maybe like a verbal judo, but you can't understate the importance of teaching someone the other aspects of a conflict, because we don't live in a time where conflict is one dimensional, where it's just I'm sorry. We don't always live in a time where it's one dimensional. Yep, you could run into the time when there's an active shooter. You could run into the time where, yeah, you do have that moment where you could be the good guy and really maybe everything's fine. But most of the times when you could have a violent situation occur, there's plenty of signs beforehand. There might be things you could do to prevent it in the first place, and you're gonna need to know about what's gonna happen after, and whether that's because there's not a lot of things that I would draw as being a positive from having been at war for the last 20 20 years this year. 20 years for the US. We've been at war. But one thing that has come to the civilian world from the the conflicts that America has been involved in the last, the United States of America has been involved in the last 20 years, has been emergency medicine in the moment. First response, things like tourniquets. When I said, I kind of came to the knife after the stabbing incident. My friend had been stabbed in his femoral artery. That's a pretty big fucking deal. If you have no idea about how the body works, how your circulatory system works, think about poking a hole in the bottom of a cup. your femoral arteries on the insides of your thighs. They're massive blood vessels, and if you
Pretty main vein, yeah.
make a hole in them, it's a big deal. Like your heart's gonna stop in about 2 minutes because there's not gonna be anything left to pump around. Um, just my buddy got pretty lucky in that a couple of us did something rather than. I learned a bunch of shit that day. I learned about fight or flight versus freeze. How fight or flight is actually one thing and freeze is the other. I didn't know anything about that at the time. How like fight or flight isn't like some opposite reaction. Fight or flight is one possible reaction you could have. Some people literally ran away, like saw what happened and sprinted away. A couple of us immediately sprinted forward, and then most of the room didn't move. Like, don't look at me, don't look at me, holy shit, don't look at me. And I didn't know anything about that. I was like 23. I think I might have even learned about that from Rory Miller later on in a book. I learned about shock that day. I was completely in shock. I the incident occurred. The ambulance came, and I was a waiter at the time, and the whole incident occurred in the kitchen of this restaurant that was running on a Monday night, and it was a sushi bar, so a lot of the food that was going out was not coming from the kitchen, and so no one outside of the kitchen knew what happened. I walked into the back. I cleaned up. I actually changed my shirt because I had a locker, and I went back out onto the floor and I continued to serve a table for a couple of minutes. And the people that I was serving kind of looked at me and were like, "Hey, you were gone for like 15 minutes, and then there was this ambulance outside, and like we were kind of nervous something happened." And I was like, "Oh no, there was an accident." I knew what happened. I watched a stabbing and all this, crazy shit went down. And I was like, "Oh no, there was an accident in the kitchen. Everything's fine now, whatever." And it didn't hit me until like right around that moment, the front door got kicked in by the police because when the incident went down, whoever called 911 said that someone got cut in the kitchen and we need an ambulance. So the ambulance drivers actually were the ones that called the police department. They didn't send a cop. There was an attempted murder and they didn't send a cop. So the cops showed up in force immediately as the ambulance was leaving, and they like kicked in the door and they look around and this restaurant is fully operational. Like the battle station is fully operational. What's going on? And they walked in the kitchen where the stabbing had happened, and they were mopping the floor. The knife had been washed already and was on the rack again. Like it
As you
was
do in a restaurant.
it was yeah, exactly. These
What are
guys
you
just
doing?
started
We're
cleaning up.
cleaning.
They started cleaning up. Right. So I'm still operating on total autopilot. I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, the police are here. I'm gonna need to clear your check." Like, got my customers out. The police did a lot of yelling at everybody, and asked some questions, and so once
What kind of
everything
yelling?
finished up, there was a lot of yelling. There was a lot of yelling. They were not happy. I've seen some really pissed off cops before. I don't think I've ever seen as pissed off as that day. And um, after everything was done, I changed my clothes. I walked out the door, and I walked directly out of the door of where I was working. I walked one door over into the next door, which was the Irish pub that I was a regular at, and I sat down. And the bartender basically pushed my regular drinks over to me with a stick. And everyone took a step back and watched. And when I went to pick up, at the time I was a Jack Daniels and a Smittix guy. When I'd come in, I'd want a neat Jack Daniels and a pint of Smittix. And I went to try and pick up my Jack Daniels. And my hand started to shake. And like, I was slinging whiskey out of that glass. And everything kind of caught up finally. Over an hour after things happened, everything all came up at once. I threw up a bunch. Then I drank a bunch more. I threw up before. I never made that first Jack Daniels. I didn't have. I don't think I drank that one. Um, I shook for a few minutes. I went in the bathroom. I puked my guts out. And then I came back out and drank a lot because I'm Irish, and that's how you handle things. You stuff it down with brown. Uh, but but I was like, holy shit, all of a sudden, and I was cold. Everything dumped out of me. So I that was my first experience for real with shock. I never had that happen before, and so from this incident, it started me down this path of starting to learn about these things, and moving on through the world of I mean, I don't want to call it, it's not competitive stick fighting, but this full contact stick fighting thing that I've been a part of um, has also opened these other doors, because a lot of guys that I stick fight with are military guys, law enforcement guys, corrections officers. Holy shit! You want to talk about some guys that get in physical confrontations all the time and have to deal with things like unknown weapons and stuff like that. Corrections officers, man, especially depending on where they are. Rock Dog is one of us. Gary Hibbets is his name, and he retired. He retired from being a corrections officer, but he's still, he's not an old man by any stretch, and he's still very powerful. Um, that guy's got He's got stories until you're blue in the face about actual confrontations with people and whatever, and he's still someone who um he's very humble about it still, and he still understands that he has stuff to learn. Like, even his level of experience in that kind of an environment with people that are willing to eat your soul because they're never leaving that fucking box that they're in, and you're the guys trying to keep them in that box. Even a guy like that, just 25 years of that darkness, um he still knows he has stuff to learn, and he still approaches the Dog Brothers experience as a guy with an empty cup, and that I think that empty cup analogy is something that, as a martial artist at all, whether you're a full contact martial artist or whether you're a guy who goes to Aikido class, like, approach it all with an empty cup, and don't ever think that the stuff that you've learned is the be all end all, because at some point you're going to get surprised by somebody who's got a whole other situation for you. You might be Chris Lieben on Anderson Silva's first day. For anybody that's a UFC fan, that makes perfect sense.
Is you don't know what you don't know.
Correct. The unk, the unknown unknown. That's I think that's a Mark McYoung thing. I think so, yeah.
I'll have to look that one up.
Unknown unknown. Yep. Because you know what you say you know what you know, and then you know what you don't know, but it's the things you don't know that might kill you. And I want to say he coined unk.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Matt, if people want to find you, how do they find you?
Well, if you'd like to find me in my capacity as Fox Hound, my Instagram is basically the best place to do so. I don't really use Facebook anymore or anything like that, but my Instagram name is Fox.
Instagram's really the best part about Facebook anyway.
It really is. My Instagram is Foxhound, but the O's in Foxhound are zeros, and there's an underscore on either side.
In the description of this.
Yeah, so it's underscore Foxhound underscore. I really wanted just the name Foxhound. I'm assuming that was taken by like a furry or something.
Or a cam girl or something.
Or a cam girl. Yep,
Or
exactly.
cam boy. I mean, like
It could be a lot of
it's an
them.
interesting world out there.
Absolutely, man. But yeah, that's the best way to find me. I do a group, or I'm sorry, I'm starting a group online lesson thing. I'm sort of working out the kinks on that, but I do absolutely private for anybody that's looking to become full contact stick fighter, or if you're just looking for some cool martial arts to learn. More than happy to show somebody some Kali and get in there with that stuff. But yep, I'm there, man. You can easily find me. I like to I'm also a good person to help direct you to somebody in your area to train in person. There's dog brothers all over the world, and if you were somebody that was like, man, I really want to get into full contact stick fighting, but I don't know how to find somebody who could teach me or whatever, go ahead, man. Reach out. I can turn you to somebody in your area, or turn you to somebody that would be willing to do some online stuff, or I got some online stuff. So hell yeah, man.
Fantastic. Matt, it's been a pleasure. We're going to do this again.
Fucking A, Ace. I appreciate it, dude.
We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Rock on.